seventh generation of gaming brought about the RPG genre having its biggest change since the leap to the third dimension. While JRPGs were still huge hits, the HD era of the PS3 also saw a ton of Western developers step up and release action RPGs that had, well, changed gaming history. You could argue that Sony's third home console had even more variety in its RPGs than prior systems, so choosing just 10 is no easy task. If you've got a DualShock 3 and 300 hours of free time, these are the best PS3 RPGs of all time you should be checking out. After several more light-hearted games in the Tales series, Tales of Xillia moved the needle back in the other direction, dealing with darker themes like terrorism. Yeah, not very chill. Unique to this entry in the series, players can choose either Jude Mathis or Miller Maxwell as their main protagonist. While both characters experience the same overall story, there are unique moments and events in each route. While Xillia's story treads down a similar path to past entries like Symphonia and Vesperia, it still features a strong hook and faster pacing than Graces did. Complementing it is a combat system that combines the combo-heavy mechanics of Graces with the sideways perspective of old titles. Xillia's combat system also does some much needed streamlining, making its combo mechanics much more accessible to players of all skill levels. Xillia also featured Lilium Orbs, a customization reminiscent of Final Fantasy X's Sphere Grid. While not quite as in-depth, it still featured a fair amount of room for player expression in developing their characters and helped keep progression engaging. Though Xillia suffers a bit from bland overworld design and a rushed finale, it's otherwise a very solidly paced RPG that doesn't overstay its welcome, unlike so many modern games in the year since its release. Right, which game is next? No question mark. Originally released for the DS as Dominion of the Dark Djinn, this 10th anniversary project saw developer Level 5 collaborating with none other than the legendary Studio Ghibli. The result is one of the PS3's most vibrant and colourful JRPGs. There's gorgeous landscapes, stunning animated cutscenes, a soundtrack composed by Joe Hisaishi himself, and a whimsical emotional story that evokes that authentic Ghibli feel. Ni no Kuni's story begins with protagonist Oliver's mother dying after rescuing him from drowning. Oh yeah, this is Studio Ghibli, isn't it? In his lowest moment, his tears bring a doll his mother gave him to life, revealing its true identity as a fairy named Drippy. At Drippy's behest, Oliver takes up the Wizard's Companion and enters an alternate world, going on a journey to stop the Dark Djinn Shadar and find a way to save his mother in the process. Along the way, Oliver will recruit many monsters as familiars, which is where the bulk of the game's combat comes in. Characters and familiars can be commanded in real-time battles akin to something like Final Fantasy XII or Xenoblade Chronicles. Each party member can switch between 3 familiars in combat. Outside of battle, these charming creatures can be raised and nurtured with food and eventually evolve into stronger forms. Though a bit of a slow burn overall, Ni no Kuni is a magical adventure that lives up to the pedigree of the people behind it. It's well worth playing this or its also underrated sequel on whichever platform you can. Valkyria Chronicles is one of those rare PS3 RPGs that felt utterly unique at the time and still holds up today. It's part strategy game, part third-person shooter, part anime war drama. A mix that sounds like it shouldn't work, but somehow it absolutely nails it. Set in a fictionalized alternate version of 1930s Europe that's also within a book, don't worry about it, you're leading Squad 7 of the Garlean militia against a full-blown Imperial invasion. Sounds grim, but the goofy onomatopoeia popping off everywhere does lighten things up a tad. The watercolour storybook-esque visuals are still stunning too. Gameplay-wise, it throws out grid-based strategy for a hybrid system where you physically move units around the battlefield in real time. Positioning your troops properly, managing limited action points, and praying a random enemy sniper doesn't ruin everything becomes a satisfying and traumatizing loop. It's also very character-driven in a social sim kind of way, with it hitting the same brutal beats that XCOM does. Welkin, Gunther, and Alicia Melchiot might sound like RPG name generators gone a bit mental, but you'll grow attached to their squad of underdogs. Permanently losing a soldier definitely stinks. Valkyria wasn't a smash hit on release, partly down to Sega's decision to release it in the West with almost no marketing, but it's easily one of the PS3's best cult RPGs, and frankly, it deserves more love. Right, time to stop dragging this entry on. Ask a long-time fan what the best game of the Dragon Age series is, and they'll likely tell you it's this one once they stop crying. That'll probably never change. BioWare's 2009 fantasy epic was able to captivate audiences with its story and gameplay in ways that the sequels never quite managed. I thought Inquisition was decent though. Yeah, pretty decent. The player takes control of the Warden. As part of the Grey Wardens, your character is tasked with fighting back against an invasion from the monstrous Darkspawn. Even by the standards of BioWare's other games, the world of Dragon Age is incredibly rich in detail, with a setting that has a deep history to it. And of course, it wouldn't be a BioWare RPG without a set of well-written and nuanced characters that still linger in the memory, some of which you can kiss on the mouth. And elsewhere. Dragon Age Origins also featured a pretty brilliant real-time with pause combat system that allowed you to issue orders to your allies, and fans pretty much lament how later entries strayed away from this tactical combat in favour of more action-orientated battles. I didn't know what they were doing with, what was it, the Veil Guard? Should have stuck with Dreadwolf as well. Though the later entries have their fans, Dragon Age Origins has arguably never been bettered for really leaning into the role-playing in a role-playing game, and is still well worth checking out today. Steel yourself, YouTube chapter skippers, the next RPG is coming up next. After leaving the streets of Crossbell, Falcom turned its attention west to the Erebonian Empire for the third arc of the Massive Trail series. While the Liberl and Crossbell arcs had its protagonists exploring the whole country, this first entry in the Cold Steel tetralogy places you in what can best be described as Persona with field trips. Cold Steel features a calendar system, school setting, relationship mechanic, and even a large dungeon that periodically updates throughout the story, but it largely eschews the Persona series' time management in favour of more traditional main story progression coupled with side quests. Complementing this is a solid turn-based combat system that introduces a linking mechanic. Characters can pair up on the fly, allowing for things like follow-up attacks, ally protection, and enhanced magic. Character customization has also been simplified with the ability to directly add specific art quartz rather than requiring specific elemental combinations to create arts lists. Make no mistake, despite the dated graphics and slow burn introduction, Trials of Cold Steel is an incredibly emotional rollercoaster that will quickly endear anyone to its cast. The fantastic localization, voice acting, and soundtrack all add so much more weight to what already felt like a more mature JRPG. Trials of Cold Steel's position as the first game of a new arc also makes it a fantastic starting point for those looking to try out Trails. Quite the revolution for the series. While a modern, possibly over-analytical lens has made some a bit more critical of human revolution, it does give you a trophy for playing basketball. And I don't need to say anything else really. No. A decade before Cyberpunk 2077 monopolised discussion of cyberpunk-themed RPG set in an augmented society, Deus Ex Human Revolution wowed audiences with the beginnings of a transhumanist world where cybernetic augmentations are becoming increasingly commonplace. Rather than solely deal with corporate dystopia, Human Revolution instead places its emphasis on the augmentations themselves and the impact they have on society. This features heavily in the main narrative, which has protagonist Adam Jensen investigating a terrorist group 6 months after an attack on his employer Sarif Industries that changes him forever. As with many other Western RPGs, player choice is at the forefront in multiple ways, including the ability to, if you want to, pull an enemy straight through a wall. How the player approaches the game is mostly up to them, and the choices they do have feel fleshed out. Take for instance the stealth system, which allows players to play through nearly the entire game by sneaking past enemies instead of engaging, and it's some of the best stealth in any game. Though lackluster boss fights drag down the experience a little bit, it doesn't stop Deus Ex Human Revolution from being a fantastic action RPG with tons of build variety and some killer performances. Not least of which was me on that basketball court. The sky was the limit for Deus Ex after this, so it's a shame Mankind Divided was so undercooked, straight off the rim. Have you noticed that with every new release, Bethesda's Elder Scrolls games have spiked in popularity? Skyrim, however, remains on a whole different level even to this day. Set 200 years after the events of Oblivion, you play as the Dragonborn. You're destined to be the one who stops Alduin, a godlike dragon who poses a threat to Skyrim and the world at large. In the middle of this is the rumblings of a civil war following an assassination and countless other stories that shaped a generation. Bethesda, at this point, had mastered creating rich and detailed open worlds. Skyrim's handcrafted setting still retains a sense of wonder and discovery 13 years later, and Bethesda's follow-up games, even those that let you venture into the vast reaches of space, haven't quite captured that same magic of exploration. It helps that Skyrim overhauled the progression systems seen in past games that really weren't for everyone. Gone were obtuse mechanics that disincentivized leveling up your character, and in their place was an intuitive and accessible system where your skills improved the more you used them. Skyrim on the PS3 did also eventually receive all 3 expansions. Taken as a whole package, Skyrim easily has dozens, perhaps even hundreds of hours worth of content, even with the lack of mod support. If you're wondering where New Vegas is on this list, well, we could only really feasibly include one kind of broken Bethesda published RPG in this video, and Skyrim just so happens to be a bit less broken. Even if playing it on the PS3 can be a challenge these days, Skyrim has left an incredible legacy, and its effect can still be felt in the gaming industry to this day. Arguably BioWare's final masterpiece, Mass Effect 2 took everything about its predecessor that was beloved and iterated upon it to create one of the best Western RPGs of all time. Gunplay was more precise, and streamlined equipment and upgrade mechanics put a bigger emphasis on action over sorting through loot. And because the entire story revolved around Shepard gathering a crew and earning their loyalty for an upcoming suicide mission, the narrative explores its characters much more deeply than the original Mass Effect did. Shepard's squad has secured their place as some of gaming's most remembered characters. Garrus, my boy, I'll never forget you. As always, player choice shapes the outcome of the narrative, with Paragon and Renegade choices that influence Shepard's personality. This time your decisions have an even bigger impact on the proceedings. The oft-talked about suicide mission is a complex final sequence where the choices you've made throughout the story, whether you've secured the loyalty of your squad and who you assign to which role, determines your level of success, and if they live or die. It's one of gaming's most memorable set pieces ever, one you know that's coming, but it can still absolutely hit you in the gut in unexpected ways. What BioWare achieved here was nothing short of incredible, and Mass Effect 2 still stands the test of time well over a decade later. The series peaked here, and whatever BioWare does manage to follow it up with, there's basically no chance they'll surpass this. They're a phantom of their former selves. Atlus's RPGs have always been fantastic, but Persona 5 was worth the agonisingly long wait. Let that be some solace to you, Persona 6 believers. It will arrive before the sun explodes. Probably. Despite continuing the trend of a high school setting, Persona 5's handling of sensitive topics helped the game resonate with audiences on a scale the studio had never seen before. It may be a slow burn with a 100+ hour runtime, but it's one of the genre's most thrilling, filled with twists and turns, while striking a good balance between Persona 3's darker mood and Persona 4's comedy and tight-knit friendships. It also completely changed what RPGs would do with UI for pretty much ever. Persona 5's combat and confidant system were all built on well-established foundations that we've seen before, yet the immaculate presentation oozes a level of personality that many other games won't come close to, all while being an absolute blast to play. While Atlus has gone on to re-release the game as Persona 5 Royal on other systems with quality of life additions and over 20 hours of new content, this original game is still well worth a look. Players looking for a bit more of a challenge and a slightly different gameplay flavour to palace and boss designs may find the original Persona 5 to be just right, since for some people, Royal pushes things a tad too far in the player's favour with its enhancements. It's a bit easier. It also helps that you'll get to hear the arguably superior Last Surprise battle theme far more often. Right, let's not waste any more time and fat roll into the number 1 best PS3 RPG of all time. When Hidetaka Miyazaki was given the chance to take control of a floundering high fantasy project at From Software, he decided that if it was already considered a failure, he could do basically whatever he wanted with it, resulting in the highly punishing Deamon Souls. And so the man of 1,000 poison swamps was born. What no one could have anticipated, however, was a sleeper hit that would go on to birth an entirely new subgenre of action role-playing games. The bleak fantasy atmosphere and punishing combat that demanded patience and mastery proved to be a hit with Western audiences, and FromSoft saw fit to begin working on a spiritual successor. Just 2 years later, which is wild to think happening these days, the world was graced with the release of Dark Souls and also the Curse of Blighttown on PlayStation 3. Soon after you leave the Undead Asylum and make the journey to Lordaeron, you're greeted with a vastly different world. Rather than split its areas into discrete levels accessed by teleporting in from a hub world, Dark Souls features sprawling world design. It was also here that Souls lore and storytelling would start to become far more detailed, weaving a tale of a world stuck in perpetual decline and shrouding the motivations of many characters in much more ambiguity. This has now become a From Software staple. If the kingdom isn't about to collapse, it's probably teetering. Also, the good person was probably evil the whole time and might have been a squid. While it certainly chugs quite a bit on PlayStation 3, Dark Souls remains an all-time classic that completely changed the industry as we know it, and proved that difficulty is not a dirty word. Dark Souls 2 was also certainly an experience.